album, this masterwork from 1971,
Mm.
and not just the obvious fact that these questions, these issues of ecology and politics and socioeconomics and all of that are still a thing. You know, we all know that, but it's it just seems tougher now. We're not hearing as many artists speaking to these kinds of things in current music. And even if they do, we don't have that wide bandwidth anymore where everybody gets a chance to hear it. And I was on a panel a couple of days ago concerning women in jazz. And I said, hey, kind of splitting it out, you have this year, we had last year, Layla Hathaway with an album called Vanta Black that was very heavily about Black pride and standing in who you are and being super proud of it. We had Michelle Ndegeocello's album, No More Water. But what was that inspired by? James Baldwin, going back to, the 50s, and 60s, and his writings. And there was one, I forgot who the other one was, but I was just saying, wow. And I don't think that all artists are missing the point of speaking to the times, but even if they do, you really have to dig now to find the music that is really speaking to what's going on. There might be a lot of music for healing and soothing, or music, like a Cleo Soul, or many female artists now that are just bringing that very much needed, nurturing, loving female spirit that we really need. But you just wonder sometimes, all those beautiful things that Maurice White wrote and Lionel Richie wrote, and so many artists from the 70s. Curtis Mayfield, my God, from the 60s. Maybe it's just all been said so perfectly that it's just hard for there to be anything else. Or do we need anything else? We'll always have those.
I think I'd like to make just a slightly different point, which I think you capture. But, when I think about the intersection also, Dr. Teresa Hort Owens, the president of the United Disciples of Christ Church, joins us on Moving Mountain Mondays in our next hour.
Yes.
Her husband, for example, is the choir director of a major church, a renowned choir director.
Yes.
And when I think about the gospel and even the blues and this dynamic, when you think about like the James Cones of life and the liberation theologians of life, they're trying to find a way to make Orthodox Christianity relevant for their times.
Yes.
And then gospel music had to become relevant for their times. And so no one who was marching or going to jail or fighting the power were separate from their faith. They were trying to make their faith work. It just wasn't a Sunday faith.
Yes.
It was a faith that had something to do with the streets. It had something to do with our social condition. It has something to do. And I hear a lot of artists, don't get me wrong. They're fighting the power. They out here singing about freedom, but living really well and flying very privately. The rest of us are on the bus. The rest of us are on the bus.
I hear you.
It's like the lyrics are right, but the place that it's coming from isn't the same place it came from for Mahalia.
No, it's not. I believe that prosperity and Black folks having had enough of suffering and helping others or being under the foot of, there really is a thing now where it's not about just survival and we're going to get over the man, with his foot on our neck. It's like, no, we are going to be. There's going to be more Muhammad Ali's. There's going to be more Simone Biles. There's going to be more Barack Obamas. It's like we're going for the mountaintop now. The Martin, it's like, we've had it. We want to party. We're going to celebrate us. We're going to be our full color self, 360 degrees. And and gospel music and spiritual music has definitely had an evolution over the years. Some people argue that it's not an evolution, because they don't like when anything gets in their minds diluted. They like the pure message. They like things to stay a certain traditional way. We've seen Tremaine Hawkins and Kirk Franklin and uh, so many, of the choir leaders that have broken through with the occasional song that kind of rises above Sunday morning and becomes this anthem that a lot of people, you know, get into. But I just think that, yeah, the difference now is that I think a lot of the young people are not about, so much being on their knees and praying for something. They want change now. They want all the best of everything now. They don't want what a lot of the generation that came before them and how they lived and got through things. No, they want all of the prosperity now.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, we'll be with A. Scott Galloway, and we're going to talk about the nowness of our music experience when we come forward. Hal Leonard Deluxe Coffee Book Table, Down the Roads, the Fender Rhodes story. He also wrote the foreword for the hardcover art book Invitation to Openness, the jazz and soul photography of Les McCann. His travels took him to Barbados, Netherlands, Rio, and Quebec, but quite frankly, A. Scott Galloway is known all over the world. A. Scott, welcome back to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you so much. Always happy to be here.
I'm so glad to have you on as our guest, and I certainly hope to have you back to spend some time with us talking about this movie Sinners. But I want to talk about something just before the break that you brought up, and that is the nowness of this generation. Yes. When we think about the evolution of our music from the motherland to the nadir, the slave experience, the Middle Passage, here in the United States, 19 scared Africans in Jamestown, Virginia, in 1619, before the Mayflower, before Plymouth Rock, Malcolm X says. And we think about the journey of that experience and the journey of that music. It seems that the breadth and the depth of the music took into account the immediate past. It took into account the existential reality of what we were going through, whether it's in Jim Crow, whether it's in secondary construction. And you pivoted just before the break on this question of this generation and the nowness of everything. And I'm wondering, does the nowness preclude or exclude, if you will, the idea that the past and what we were going through in that existential reality influenced the music in ways that the download, the quick response, the freedom struggle of this is a hit freedom struggle song that's not necessarily tied to the deep richness of that past. Does that matter, A. Scott?
It does matter, and I always feel like I always tell people there's always lots of very powerful music that's being made, but it's not what we tend to be exposed to on these talent shows, on television, or on national radio. You know, you pretty much always have to find it in hidden places or more underground places, such as certain radio shows, usually on college radio stations, of course, on the internet. It's really hard for me to say because once, you know, a lot of current music, I'm 60 years old, so I don't really listen as, I don't even follow a lot of what current music is going on as far as pop music. I'm listening to artists that are doing the things that I would expect to happen, such as, like I said, Michelle and Cello, people that are pulling styles together, people that have messages and they're pulling inspiration from deep wells, like a James Baldwin or someone. You know, it's really hard for me to put a finger on how young artists, how much they really respect, appreciate, and have absorbed the richness of their own culture musically, and if they have that desire to really bring it forward message wise and everything. I mean, I think, you know, they would all love to be the next Aretha or Donnie or Marvin, you know, in a success terms, but you know, some of the most promising voices of the last 20, 30 years barely made any albums. And I don't, you know, I mean, they were very highly praised, and but they didn't have a through line of communicating and really connecting the world to what's going on as far as music. And I'm talking about Lauryn Hill, who everybody would expect her to have made several albums now that have spoken and continue to speak about the great things, or just to speak about life and Black woman life, Black life, whatever, and including it as brilliantly as her debut album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill.
Mm.
D'Angelo also, a couple of amazing records, and then a 20-year gap, and then, another album that was, I don't want to be put the critic's hat on today, but I didn't think it was, his best work. I couldn't even understand a lot of what was being said on that record, literally, just the way he was singing. When I think about, artists and messages with a through line, I mean, with all of the problems that Marvin Gaye had, he was continually making records, and they weren't all what's going on. He did love records. He did sex records. He did, it's a divorce. I have to, in order to pay my first wife off, I have to make this record. Here, my dear, you know. And what I'm saying though is that he never stopped. Like he was a creative artist to
That's
me.
like Tyson taking on one more fight.
Okay, oh my
That was
God,
the IRS.
But I just mean, if you're an artist and you're supposed to reflect your times, as Nina Simone has classically said, and a lot of artists have taken up that mantle from her quote, as an artist, it is my responsibility to speak to the times. So many of the ones that were really elevated and were given the shot to be the next, prophet, the next savior of Black music, crumbled terribly. I mean, like, where's your output? I think that's one of the main reasons why we haven't had as much success with young artists expressing, what's going on in the world, because the ones that we thought were going to do it kind of dropped the ball.
Let
So
me just add
it's
this.
not one person that you go to. It's this song over here, and that somebody broke through with that one song over here, or this and that. But where's the person that's carrying that torch that everybody else can always stand behind? I don't see that.
I want to share with you just a very brief story before we come forward that my
Yes.
father used to share with me when I was growing up. We were in a church one Sunday morning,
Mm-hmm.
and a young lady, she must have been 11 years old. She got up and she sang Amazing Grace, and it was really something else. I was particularly moved by a young lady at 10 or 11 years old who could actually sing the song. But Dad then turned to me and he said, "You should hear Jackie Verdell sing this. You should hear Mahalia sing this."
Mm-hmm.
And what Dad was really saying, when I reflect upon it after this very deep conversation I'm having with you, was song is made for a lived experience.
Yes.
And even though that 11-year-old girl could sing that song, she could not sing that song. That's a song that you have to earn the right through living to experience the pain, the suffering of all that it entails. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. We're talking about the history of our music. We're talking about feelings and how we communicate during these very difficult times. When we come forward, our very special guest in our final segment will be A. Scott Galloway.
Graduating seniors earning a total of $3 million in scholarships, more than any other school in Los Angeles. We are dedicated to helping all students turn your college dreams into reality. Catch Prep is now enrolling. Visit us online at catchhighschool.com or call 323-293-3917. Space is limited. Please enroll now for summer credit recovery and fall 2025. Call 323-293-3917 or enroll today at catchhighschool.com.
You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
To the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest in the past hour has been A. Scott Galloway. A. Scott is a music aficionado, a historian par excellence of African American and Black music from the beginning of our journey to the present era. A. Scott, I want to welcome you forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. And I also want to take advantage of this opportunity to share with our audience that our second hour begins a series called Moving Mountain Mondays that is led by none other than Dr. Reverend Teresa Hord Owens, who is the General Minister and President of the Christian Church of the Disciples of Christ in the United States and Canada. She's the first person of color and second woman to lead the denomination and the first woman of African descent to lead a mainline denomination. She is with us here in this segment, in part because her husband is a choir director, a renowned choir director, one of the most influential choirs in the city of Chicago. And I wanted her to share with us and to share with Scott the importance of music in our faith and spiritual experience. Dr. Owens, welcome to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. And please welcome A. Scott Galloway.
Hello.
Welcome. I've enjoyed listening to the conversation. A. Scott Galloway.
Thank you.
I think what you said about music being lived experience is so important. Let me give you a good example of that. I lead a denomination that's like 80% white, 10% Black, 6-7% Hispanic, 2 to 3% Asian Pacific Islander. I pastored a white church in the suburbs of Chicago in Downers Grove, Illinois. And I tried to bring some music to them, some basic contemporary stuff. What I learned was that they couldn't sing the song. They didn't get why it was important because they hadn't lived the experience. They hadn't dealt with the oppression. They hadn't struggled. Even a song that's as easy, a unison line, I need you to survive, and they were looking for a more structured song, right? The choir director was Episcopalian, and he said, it just repeats. It keeps repeating. Do we have to keep modulating so often? I'm like, what you're not understanding is that people are testifying with this song, and the more they sing it, the more engaged they are with the message, and the lifting of the keys. Is the key changes are really just a way of going higher and higher, and the higher you go, the stronger you feel with it. But that was an important lesson for me to think, they don't really it's not like they don't like the song. They just didn't get the words. They didn't get what it means to need God. They didn't get what it means to struggle. And I kind of had to pull back from some of that because I knew that the music had to mean something to them. So I really appreciate what you said about music, lived experience. I'm here in Johannesburg, South Africa. I attended a Black congregation that's affiliated with the United Reformed Church of South Africa, which is part of the Dutch Reformed Church. No music except for drums.
Wow.
The first half hour of the service was just the choir doing what we would call praise and worship for like a good half an hour. They did some hymns. When they did the hymns that have clearly been given to them by the Western culture, right? It is well with my soul. But they didn't sing it the way we sing it as Black folks in the U.S. It was still very, very straight. Even when they sang Amazing Grace, it was kind of straight. So you could tell the things that had been introduced. They sang them in Zulu and then in English.
Mm.
And then when their choir closed out the service, they're going to have a choir competition. I was like, how American is that? Choir competition. They sang Swing Low, Sweet Chariot.
Mm.
And then they ended the service with Kosi Sikalela, which is the South African national anthem. And it struck me that of all the ways in which, what they call African survivalisms, those of us who are in the diaspora, when we see this music and dance and, the ring shout, they were doing all of that. When we see the way it's done in the original context on the continent, and we see what we've still caught of it. There was a brother from Antigua sitting next to me who was talking about in the Caribbean, these things are still, recognizable. And here they came with what we think of as an African American spiritual, and it hit me that there have to be, right, some original African roots of that song that we used for our own experience. But just the idea that, as Jesse said, some people just can't sing the song because it doesn't mean anything to them. They just haven't lived enough. So I've seen that in a cross-cultural context. They might enjoy the music in a worship experience. We try to make our General Assembly very multicultural, but there is something about that lived experience that can't just take you all the way in unless you have lived through it.
Hey, Scott?
You have to have felt that and been exposed to that. And yeah, and even if you bring it into today's music, I mean, like I have nothing against the best of current hip hop and the best of R&B. I mean, you look at Beyonce and what she's been able to do in reminding everybody in a very in your face way that, Black music includes country music. We started that. And with Kendrick Lamar again and the forefront rappers. But I think a tangent from what you're saying, Reverend, is that I think we continue to move on. We grow, we move, we want to change things. We're very expressive about what we're doing. And the only detriment to that I find sometimes, especially with hip hop, is that they get so into the art and craft of the lyrical flow and the metaphors and all this depth. I mean, they're saying some really powerful things, but there's only a certain amount of people that are going to be able to flow with that are going to be able to digest that, understand that, and unless they're listening to it over and over and over and over again. And like I said, at my age, I'm not driving around listening to Kendrick Lamar. So I mean, I just know the hook, and I know I hear certain points in the songs. I'm like, yeah, that's powerful. I like that. But there's this really fine balance that has to happen where you can make profound statements in creative ways with a lot of soul, but that are pretty easy to understand. Like the hook of it, the meat of it, the message of it, and why we're supposed to be uplifted and what it's all about. That's something that I think has become harder to find as the music continues to grow and the expression and artfulness of things grow. They don't really keep things on a real, straightforward basis, and especially popular music.
I just want to comment on what I heard the president say, President Owens, when she said she tried to bring the spirit over there. And
I tried. I really did.
She tried to bring the spirit over there, but and if we're all paying attention, when we watch the news at night, we've seen Joe Biden, for example, in these cultural events, and I mean he's trying to keep up with the clap. I mean we've seen Donald Trump in his kind of one little dance that he does. I mean he's trying to keep up with the cultural experience, but it's just not reaching them. It's not as Dr. President Owens has said, the lived experience. As you've said, A. Scott, it's not the lived experience. It's the difference between the 10-year-old girl and the 80-year-old woman singing, the songs of our faith, the hymns of our faith. Let me allow in this final 2 minutes, A. Scott Galloway to conclude for us on a word of hope. Dr. Teresa Hord Owens will be our special guest for the next hour as she begins to share with us how we're going to move these mountains on Moving Mountain Mondays. Hey, Scott, you got about 1 minute and 45 seconds.
I would just implore anybody of any age to find and create opportunities, no matter how small or great, to pass down the importance and
Yeah.
and the glory, the fun. Not don't make it a heavy thing. It's like, hey, there's this great part of our culture that I want to make sure that you know about. Play different things in the car when you have them. Don't have the everybody's got their earbuds in and they're all plugged into their own thing. It's like, what, on this particular trip back to the house from school, let's listen to some Nancy. This is a lady named Nancy Wilson, and she epitomizes, great class and jazz, and she has a wonderful voice, and I want you to check her out. And then maybe we'll listen to some music by a band called War that came out of Southern California and created a tapestry of music that's all sorts of different things. You're going to like it. The song Lowrider, it's fun, but guess what? It's African, it's Latin, it's funk, it's pop. This is good stuff, to listen to, let alone, some serious spiritual music or some straight ahead jazz or some down home blues. Always create those opportunities for young.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You've been listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. In this hour, my very special guest has been A. Scott Galloway.
Black House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries says former President Trump misled Americans about his intentions with Iran. In a statement, Jeffries said Trump promised peace in the Middle East, but has only escalated tensions, especially after ordering strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear sites over the weekend. The U.S. has confirmed Iran attacked its airbase in Qatar, but says there are no reported casualties. Iran warned Qatar ahead of time, raising hopes the conflict may cool. State TV says Iran matched the number of missiles the U.S. used in its earlier strike. Reports say other U.S. bases